and it's about President Trump. And now Illinois, the state of Illinois, is suing to block Trump's National Guard deployment. Lawsuit is the latest escalation between the administration and Democratic-led states, is what the title of the article says. It informs us Illinois officials sued Monday to stop President Trump from deploying National Guard forces to Chicago as the administration's confrontation with Democratic-led states escalated nationwide. On Saturday, Trump ordered the federalization of 300 Illinois National Guardsmen over the objection of Governor J.B. Pritzker, contending that emergency conditions beyond the control of civilian authorities are impeding the enforcement of federal immigration law. The administration over the weekend also ordered the federalization of 400 soldiers of the Texas National Guard for deployment where needed, including to Chicago and Portland, Oregon, another of Trump's targets. Monday's lawsuit filed by the state of Illinois and the city of Chicago argues that Trump's Chicago order reflects a long-standing hostility to the city and its leaders rather than a true emergency requiring a military response. It cited Trump's comments stretching back more than a decade, including a 2013 social media post where the future president said, quote, "We need our troops on the streets of Chicago, not in Syria," where the militant group Islamic State was then expanding during a chaotic civil war. A new case follows an extraordinary weekend over legal maneuvering in Oregon. U.S. District Judge Karen Immergut on Saturday halted the federalization of 200 Oregon National Guardsmen for similar purposes there. Trump then responded by ordering 300 federalized California Guard troops to Portland, spurring Immergut, a Trump appointee, to issue a broader order that temporarily blocked the president from deploying any National Guard troops to the state. Ladies and gentlemen, here's the deal. Trump has no business doing what he's doing. It's utter bullshit. And it's deflectionary. Because it's not an accident that so much of this has escalated since the whole Epstein files riled the right, meaning the MAGA right. I mean, we were born at night, not last night. Okay? Let's get that out the way first. This is BS. And the reason why I call it BS is because it is universally recognized, constitutionally recognized, that the president can do that in a place like Washington, D.C., because Washington, D.C. is run by the federal government. But in states, in our republic, the governor is the commander-in-chief of that respective state. It is not the president. So when you order the National Guards for Oregon and the governor of Oregon and the attorney general for Oregon says we don't need you, and you do it anyway, you're going to get a ruling like the Trump-appointed judge ruled against them. When you try to do that in Chicago or Maryland, Baltimore, for example, no, that's going to happen. When you try to do it in Chicago with Illinois and Governor Pritzker, that's going to happen. Okay, you try to do that stuff in New York with Governor Hochul or somebody, that's going to happen. You try to do it in California with Governor Newsom, you're going to see lawsuits all over the place. So why do you continue to do this? Why do you continue to use taxpayer money on stuff that is clearly not going to work? Because it's politically expedient, not just for the purposes of you living up to your vows that you've made to your constituency, but also it's distractionary because the more we get to focus on this stuff, the less we get to focus on Epstein. Now, I don't care about, the Epstein. Listen, anybody that's guilty of doing what Jeffrey Epstein did should be thrown under the damn jail. When I say I don't care, I don't mean it literally. I mean that ultimately I don't believe that something's going to happen to the president and others over stuff involving Epstein. I think the MAGA right that's absent, that after this, that's fixated on this, I think it's going to be a futile effort. Not that it doesn't matter, not that I don't care, not that it's frivolous. No, it's very important. Anytime children have been abused, that's a very, very serious thing. And I'm certainly not even about to try to make light of something like that. I have 2 daughters, 2 teenage daughters. I understand. I'm just talking about actually the probability of you actually getting a president or other well-known figures on this matter based off of accusations in an Epstein file is slim to none. The best you could hope for is humiliation. You were mentioned in an Epstein file. They can categorically deny it. What proof does exist to convict them of something. They can categorically deny it. So in that regard, I'm saying, okay, I doubt that it's going to amount to anything, but Trump, Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, FBI, okay, Dan Bongino and these guys, they promised the mega right. They were going to see the Epstein files. Where are they? So it's all a distraction. I get it. Here's the other side to this, though. And this is where you're not going to like this, but I'm going to call it like I see it. No president or anybody should be circumventing the Constitution. And I get that. But ladies and gentlemen, I have to say this to you. I have to say this to people that work for me, that sit right in front of me and others. I feel that way about every place but Chicago. I'm not going to lie. I know he's wrong legally. I suspect that he'll be overruled on this matter. I get it. I understand it. I really do. But when it comes to the streets of Chicago, well, what we've been hearing about, I can't get over it. Just this past weekend, 5 dead, 25 wounded in yet another Chicago weekend shooting. At least 5 people were killed and 24 others were wounded in weekend shootings in Chicago as of Sunday. The ages of the victims range from 16 to 62. In the first shooting of the weekend, police responded to a person shot around 7:45 p.m. in the 900 block of West 85th Street and found a man inside an apartment with a gunshot wound to the head. The victim was pronounced dead at the scene. His age was not released. Officers searched the area and found another man of unknown age in the alley who was shot in the torso. The victim was taken to Christ Hospital, where he was pronounced dead. Preliminary investigation indicated that both men were shot inside the apartment. Later in the evening, around 9:30, a 16-year-old boy self-transported to Holy Cross Hospital after he was shot in the leg. Police did not provide the address where the shooting occurred. The victim told officers that he was walking outside when he was shot by an unknown person riding in a black SUV. Minutes after that, around 9:36 p.m., a 49-year-old man was shot while standing outside in the 200 block of East Garfield Boulevard. I mean, damn, you're 16, you're 30, you're 49, you're 62, you're standing on a block, you're sitting in an apartment, you're standing on a street, you're walking a dog, and you're getting shot. Ladies and gentlemen, these stories are not new to Chicago. It's not new to Chicago. And whatever the hell they want to tell us about numbers and how homicides have dissipated and how things are not as bad as they used to be, that is not the impression that the nation is getting or has gotten about the city of Chicago. How do we know this? Because it was there before Trump got into office. It was there when Biden was in office. It was there when Trump was in office the first time. It was there when Obama was in office for 8 years. For 8 years. And when we talk about local officials in certain states doing stuff to alleviate some of these concerns, I remember when Rahm Emanuel was the mayor of Chicago, and there was some district attorney that came there. And there was some report that people were expecting at the time, and then lo and behold, it didn't happen. And then she ended up not getting reelected. And the belief is that she was warded off from revealing some damning information, statistically, analytically speaking, about what was transpiring in the city of Chicago, because it wasn't beneficial to elected officials. This is while Barack Obama was in office and Rahm Emanuel was the mayor. Now, it's not about pointing fingers at specific politicians, because we all know with a bureaucracy, there's so much more that goes into it. All I'm trying to do to make the point is, this ain't about Trump in Chicago. It's not about Republicans in office. It's not about Republicans having the House or the Senate. It's about no matter who the hell is in office or who's out of office, the same problems persist in the streets of Chicago. And you got black people clamoring for national interference and federal assistance. Legally, I support Governor Pritzker in what he's saying. Trump has no business going this far. I get that. I'm just saying respectfully to Governor Pritzker, that might be applicable anywhere else but in Chicago. It's been a mess. And black people have been dying left and right. And I'm not going to sit idly by and say nothing. Something got to be done. And I'm not saying it's what Trump has to do. But if what Trump is trying to do brings attention to the point where it alarms a nation as to what is transpiring in the streets of Chicago, then so be it. Desperate times, desperate measures. I got love for all of us as a human race. But I'm a black man, and I ain't gonna sit here and act like my love for black people, for my own, doesn't supersede almost anything else. It's hard reading about, seeing, watching, hearing all of this stuff going on in Chicago for decades with little to nothing being done about it. I'm not saying Trump is right. I'm saying times in Chicago should be considered so desperate that even though he should be stopped from bringing the National Guards in, perhaps, Governor Pritzker, you should say, you know what? I do need federal assistance. I may not want the National Guard, but let's sit down and talk and figure out something. Because clearly what we're doing in Chicago ain't enough. You should at least be able to do that. You and Mayor Johnson. That's it for this edition of Straight Shooter. That's all I had to say. I had it on my mind. Just wanted to let y'all know.
I want to get you some breaking news coming into us here at CNN. New video now showing members of the Texas National Guard on the ground near Chicago. This is at the Elwood U.S. Army Reserve Center. So a law enforcement source is telling us around 200 Texas Guard troops have arrived in that area on orders from President Donald Trump. CNN's Omar Jimenez is outside of that military facility and joins us now. So Omar, what else are you seeing there? What kind of activity has been happening today?
Well, as of the last few minutes, not much. And the reason for that being is we are just outside the Army Reserve Training Center. You might be able to see the sign there. And what we were watching for were troops that were gathering at one point, but then these trucks were pulled in front of us to block our view. I mean, literally one by one, they were lined up as we were trying to see on the other side of these. We did, though, before the trucks actually got here, see what appeared to be National Guard troops with the T insignia on their left arms, which matches what we saw from Governor Greg Abbott when he tweeted out pictures showing them being deployed here. Obviously, at this point, Governor Abbott has said they are here. We have observed them here on the ground as well. Now, what's interesting is now it comes down to what exactly is happening at this base. This is really the only vantage point we have at all to see any form of what's going on the base. And we have seen some troops actually walking back and forth here a little bit. We see some walking, but it's just hard to get a close view to see if they, again, have that patch on their arms indicating they are from Texas. Now, one of the things they are likely doing at this point, I mean, it is a training center. We don't exactly know what the scope of their orders here will be. It's actually one of the questions that the federal judge in this case, who's ruling over the lawsuit Illinois and the city of Chicago filed against the Trump administration, wanted to know too. What exactly will they be doing? Will these be people facing deployments? Will these be just to protect federal employees or federal personnel and property, as some of the initial orders from the White House have laid out? those are part of the questions that, of course, a lot of people have at this point. But it does seem right now that the Texas National Guard not only is here on the ground in Illinois, outside of here in Chicago, but at this particular base, the beginning stages of what is still to be seen as to what the reality of any deployment actually looks like, Erica.
Yeah, absolutely. Good to have you on the ground there, and fascinating the way they so quickly tried to maneuver those trucks to block the view. Omar, appreciate it. Thank you. Boris?
Let's dig deeper on this with retired U.S. Army Major General William Enyart. He's a former Adjutant General of Illinois, which is the highest-ranking military official in the Illinois National Guard. General, thank you so much for being with us. Democratic Senator Dick Durbin of Illinois claims that National Guard members are being used as political pawns for President Trump. Do you share that concern?
Well, I think that's a pretty accurate assessment by Senator Durbin. Bringing in Texas National Guard is really a vast overreach for the federal government here. One of the things that we pride ourselves on in the Illinois National Guard are our contacts and our network with other public resources. And we worked extensively with Chicago Police Department, Chicago Fire Department, emergency management agencies, and indeed police departments and sheriff's departments throughout the state of Illinois, particularly in our natural disaster response framework. So to bring in someone from 1,000 miles away who doesn't have any of those contacts, doesn't have any of that network developed, is absolutely a hazard to public safety. It's not a benefit to public safety.
I wonder, General, if you have any concerns about the training that these guardsmen have in the context of the job that they might be now doing in Illinois.
Well, Boris, the National Guard is a wonderful instrument. I like to think of it as a Swiss Army knife. We've got a lot of skills, but we are not trained civilian law enforcement officers. These National Guardsmen will get a couple of hours at most of civil disturbance training. They may get some rules, and they certainly should get some rules of engagement training, but they don't have the months and years of training and the ongoing continuing education that police officers here in Illinois are required to have. So they are putting an untrained force into what may become a hazardous situation. And it's a situation. I spoke last night with a very senior official in the Illinois State Police who assured me that the Illinois State Police have things under control in conjunction with the local police and the Cook County Sheriff's Department.
To that point, the administration argues that ICE officials and federal agents are not able to manage their mission given demonstrations and the public response to the immigration crackdown. It doesn't seem like you actually believe that that is the case, this merits sending the National Guard, that there is, in the administration's eyes, an open rebellion.
Well, it's ridiculous. In fact, the latest video coming from the ICE facility shows there are exactly 2 demonstrators there. So if all of these ICE folks are terrified of 2 demonstrators, then perhaps we need different ICE agents. And in fact, when I was speaking to the Illinois State Police official last night, that official indicated to me that in that official's opinion, these folks are, quote, I'm directly quoting, cowboys, end quote. And the Illinois State Police are highly skilled, very professional officers, and if they needed any help, they wouldn't hesitate to call. I know that the director of the state police sits in the governor's cabinet, along with the current adjutant general who commands the National Guard. They've got each other on speed dial. And if they needed somebody, they'd pick up that phone and call, and it would happen immediately. This is just an overreach by the federal government. Donald Trump is trying to distract from all of his problems, whether it be tariffs or the Epstein files or the crashing labor market.
Major General William Enyart, thank you so much for the time.
As far as what we are hearing, the National Guard, first of all, it's illegal, unconstitutional, it's dangerous, it's wrong. This is not about deportation. This is not about safety for this president. This is about authoritarianism. It's about stoking fear. It's about breaking the Constitution that would give him that much more control over our American cities.
Hi again, everyone. It's now 5 o'clock in New York. More escalations to report in the standoff between our commander-in-chief and American cities he doesn't like. Today, as leaders like the one you just heard, Chicago's mayor, call out Trump's desires to deploy federal troops to the streets of cities run by Democratic elected officials, as Trump in the Oval Office yet again raised the prospect of invoking the Insurrection Act. Today, notable not just for the growing clash of rhetoric, but of troops actually appearing on the ground. The Texas National Guard has arrived in Chicago. The Chicago Tribune reports that its journalists, quote, saw several military members dressed in camouflage and carrying long guns on federal property in the far southwest suburbs Tuesday morning. Soldiers who had T patches on their arms identical to the one shown in a picture tweeted by Texas Governor Greg Abbott on Monday could be seen walking in and out of mobile sleeping units on the site, end quote. The presence of these out-of-state troops comes as a judge declined to immediately respond to a lawsuit filed by the state of Illinois, which we covered on this program yesterday. That lawsuit said the Trump administration's efforts to send in the National Guard against the wishes of the state's governor are illegal and unconstitutional. The judge in this case, U.S. District Judge April Perry, said she needed time to go through the government's response to the suit and scheduled a hearing for Thursday, giving Trump and his allies a small window of time to send troops into the Windy City, an opportunity they are seizing upon. But as Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker said to our colleague Rachel Maddow last night, taking this step could be risky before the judge officially rules. Watch.
Well, the judge did warn the federal lawyers that if, in fact, they brought those National Guard and put them on the streets, that would be a really bad idea because there may be a ruling against them in just a couple of days. And I might add that if they do deploy them to the streets and then they are ruled against, I mean, how embarrassing to have to turn tail and run back to Texas 2 days after you've arrived in Chicago.
Chicago being in the state of limbo for a few days stands in contrast to what has happened this week in Portland, where a judge did temporarily block the administration from sending in National Guard troops from other states. The Illinois Attorney General argues in the lawsuit filed yesterday, quote, the American people, regardless of where they reside, should not live under the threat of occupation by the U.S. military, particularly not simply because their city or state leadership has fallen out of a president's favor. That is where we begin the hour. Some of our favorite reporters and friends. MSNBC senior national and political correspondent Jacob Sobroff is on the ground outside Chicago. Also joining us, staff writer at The Atlantic and a contributor to The Atlantic Daily Newsletter, Tom Nichols is here. He's a professor emeritus of national security affairs at the U.S. Naval War College, where he taught for more than 2 decades. Plus, host of the Bulwark podcast, MSNBC political analyst Tim Miller is here. Jacob, I start with you. Just bring me up to date since we talked exactly 24 hours ago of what you're seeing and reporting on the ground in Chicago.
Well, as you said, Nicole, you know, the big development of the day is that the National Guard from Texas is now here. But I think that the point that I believe everyone needs to understand and that is crucially important for us to make is the reason they're here is because the President of the United States and his allies are calling this city and Cook County and the surrounding areas essentially lawless. The situation is out of control. It requires the National Guard to put down and protect not only the federal agents here, but widespread violence across this city. That is not what I have seen in this city at all. And in fact, if they are indeed going after the worst of the worst, we, MSNBC, witnessed the exact opposite today. And I want to tell you one specific anecdotal story that we saw here in Cicero. This is the most Hispanic community in all of Illinois. 89%, almost 90% of the people who live here are Latino or Hispanic out of the 90,000 people people that live here. And we showed up at this bakery literally 20 minutes today after they went after and they arrested two people. And I want to make sure I give you their names. And let's take a picture. Let's take a picture of them right now so I can show you who they are. Mario Martinez and Daniel Cabrera. This is a video of Border Patrol. There they are. Mario Martinez is on the right, Daniel Cabrera is on the left. The Border Patrol showed up here outside of this bakery. They have been patrolling this neighborhood all day, and they grabbed these guys. We can show that video again. And we've got some surveillance video from inside that they were doing nothing other than grabbing their cup of coffee before their day of work. And they are two of multiple people who have been taken in this neighborhood today alone, not because they are the worst of the worst. I also met people, here's some surveillance video, as they chased these guys. They left their cups of coffee, as you see there, sitting down on the trash can outside of the store after Border Patrol. And it looks like they've got someone following them, actually filming there, Nicole, chase them inside this bakery. While we were here reporting on the scene, a cousin of one of the two men, Daniel, showed up to ask me, do I know where to find him? I want to show you a little bit of our conversation right now. Watch this.
They just randomly showed up. He didn't do anything wrong. They just took him forcefully. They're scaring everybody around now, so I feel like a target too, even though I'm a U.S. citizen. But
You feel like they would even arrest you?
yeah, at this point I do.
Does your cousin have a family?
Yeah, he does. His mom, dad, everybody here, his kids.
He's got kids too.
Yeah.
And so now, what country is he from?
He's originally from Mexico, but he was making a life here for his family, and as you can, like I told you, he was about to open up a shop.
I'm really sorry again that you're going through this, and I appreciate it. And I know that you're looking for him. You still don't know where he is.
Yeah, I'm just trying to find any clues, ideas, see where they took him, why they took him, and what's the whole purpose for this.
That's a question, Nicole, that people all across Chicago, but especially today in this neighborhood, are asking. Where are their loved ones? Where are their family members who have been picked up off the street, not because they're the worst of the worst, but because they were going about their daily activities? Mario Martinez has been in the hospital for the last several months. He had a heart condition, was sick as well. He doesn't have his medication, and his wife was telling us, just like Nori Ramos, who we've introduced to people from on your show as well, not sure that he's going to get his medicine inside ICE detention, what the consequences of that will be, nor if they'll ever see him again, Nicole.
I think people watching wonder how that is possible, that someone who drove up to a bakery to get a cup of coffee is now someone that you can there credibly report his family may never see again. Say more.
Well, that's exactly right. I was at the Broadview ICE detention facility yesterday. Here was the first place I went when I got to Chicago, because it's become somewhat of a flashpoint. It's been this staging location, both for the federal agents, but also for the people that they're bringing there before they send them off to other ICE detention facilities. And I can't tell you the number of people, including people in LA, who we haven't reported about on air, who contact me regularly, almost every day, saying, I can't find my loved one in the system. Usually there's something called an A number that ICE has, and they're able to track people very specifically. But people have been moved around so quickly within this ICE detention system that people are terrified that while they might be able to make contact, and Mr. Martinez was able to contact his wife and say that he hopes that he can get his medicine from her, he doesn't know how long he's going to be detained for here in the Illinois area, if he's going to be sent to a detention center in Arizona or Louisiana or California, and how long it'll be before the Trump administration sends this gentleman to Mexico, a place he hasn't been for much of his life, and leaving the home behind of this beautiful neighborhood, this peaceful neighborhood today in the western suburbs of Chicago.
What is the predicate that they articulate beyond racial profiling?
It's such an important question as well. Governor Pritzker said to Rachel, I thought it was the most fascinating part of the interview last night, about why they are operating in the Chicago area. They are allowed to operate within 100 miles of the U.S. border by statute. But obviously Chicago is not within 100 miles of the northern border to Canada. They are saying they are operating here because Lake Michigan is the border with Canada. And that is the excuse, according to Governor Pritzker, at least what he told Rachel last night. So they're saying they have full reign to drive around as if they are on the southwest border or in a border community on the northern border, to look for people who are undocumented in day-to-day activities. We heard what Greg Bavino said to the local reporter here in Chicago, and I'm paraphrasing, but he essentially said, we can look for people based on their looks, and they may not be looking like you. The reporter was white or Caucasian. That's what people here feel like, that why would the Border Patrol in tactical gear, masked up, be running around chasing people getting a cup of coffee in the most Hispanic neighborhood in the state of Illinois when things are largely peaceful here? Why would an elderly woman around the corner from here around the same time be picked up as she walked down the street? Her neighbor walked out shaking when I was talking to him, so nervous that he had seen this immigration enforcement operation take place on his peaceful residential street, where I asked him, are there murderers and rapists and criminals? Is that what's going on around here? And he said, no, absolutely not. This is a hardworking community. But the Border Patrol says they're operating within their legal right to be within 100 miles of the U.S. border, which I guess, according to Governor Pritzker, is Lake Michigan.
Let me ask you about one more story that we've covered together this week. This is the Chicago Sun-Times, which has had incredible reporting on what's happening in its city. An attorney for the woman shot by Border Patrol claims agents said, quote, do something B-word before shooting. Quote, body camera video of a Border Patrol agent involved in the shooting of a woman who was allegedly chasing agents in Brighton Park over the weekend shows an officer saying, quote, do something B-word before pulling over and shooting the woman 5 times, the woman's attorney said in federal court Monday. The video appears to contradict the government's allegation that Marmar Martinez, 30 years old, drove toward officers before one of them opened fire on her late Saturday morning on Kedzie Avenue near 39th Street. Her attorney, Christopher Parenti, said at a detention hearing at the Dirksen Federal Courthouse. What is your understanding of who is crafting the government statements and their association with the truth at this point?
You know, we reached out to ICE and CBP about what happened here, Nicole, and it's radio silence. And you hear from them in times, I feel, as someone who tries to get answers from them regularly, when these things reach a boiling point that they're sort of forced to respond. And this one was a flashpoint that everybody saw. A woman was shot, and now this alternate telling of the story is coming out that contradicts their initial explanation of what happened, and we have seen that time and again. One thing we've also seen time and again that's consistent with that telling of the story, and obviously I can't confirm those specifics myself, is the aggressive nature of the behavior of the federal agents on the streets. And in essence, they want people to see how aggressive they're being, whether it's marching down Michigan Avenue with masks and long rifles, or coming into a community like this, driving around. I've seen from rapid response community members here today alone, agents sticking less lethal weapons out the windows, yelling at protesters or people who are monitoring them. That aggressive behavior is what is the constant. The inability to get a straight answer from ICE or CBP, in my experience as a journalist, has also been a constant in this large-scale mass deportation effort, whether it's at Home Depot parking lots in Los Angeles or here in Cicero in Chicago. And that's why I think it's so important that, and I'm grateful to you and to MSNBC for having us here on the ground so that we can see it for ourselves. We were only 20 minutes behind this, but these incidents are happening every day all around this community now for almost 1 month. It'll be a month on the 8th.
Building in my district with flashbang grenades and dragged children, some of them naked, into the streets. This is not the America I know. She's talking about an incident that took place on the south side of Chicago. She says that the man in the White House is playing dictator and abusing his powers while our economy is hemorrhaging money every day during Trump's shutdown. He wants to further waste taxpayer dollars to deploy the National Guard. I refuse to bend the knee, although many of my Republican colleagues have, and I will never give to a man hell-bent on destroying our city. That is, again, coming from Representative Robin Kelly. So you see here, again, that the conversation here in Chicago has really quelled and really caused a national, statewide debate here, as well as things that are local. Going back to this press conference here that we're awaiting with CPD, This is going to be the first time we have heard from Superintendent Snelling in a while, as a lot of these things that we have seen, the operations that we've seen as of late, really go into the purview of federal authorities. But over the weekend, there was a situation with a lot that took place and a lot that's come out of it. So CPD has issued statements in terms of what they did do. They say clarifying some misinformation that was out there. The National FOP, though, that's a Fraternal Order of Police, and the Illinois State Fraternal Order of Police have condemned reports that Chicago police officers were barred, this is from them, from assisting ICE agents. So again, CPD addressing this controversy, the FOP stating that they are condemning what took place over the weekend, saying that CPD was barred from assisting ICE agents. The national president of the Fraternal Order of Police, and also Chris Southwood, who is the president of the Illinois State Fraternal Order of Police Lodge, say that they are shocked and appalled at reports coming out of Chicago that commanding officers were barred, local law enforcement, from assisting in immigration and customs enforcement. That an officer, while he was surrounded by a group of protesters, they say details are emerging, but it appears that officers from CPD were ordered not to assist a group of ICE agents while they were physically threatened by what appeared to be an angry mob. This is their words. They say, let me be clear, both the National FOP and the Illinois FOP believe that when an officer calls for assistance, you answer no matter what. We see Superintendent Snelling making his way into the room and up to the mic, and again, just as soon as he begins to speak, we're going to go ahead and listen in. Let's listen in now.
Calling this press conference to talk about some of the things that's going on in the city. So I want to be clear about one thing. This is about law enforcement response to these types of incidents. So I want to be clear that I'm going to limit my responses to that. So it would be appreciated if your questions are around our law enforcement response to what we're seeing here with federal agents and immigration enforcement and how we respond. I've been quiet a little too long because I want to stay out of the politics of this, because as you know, there's a lot of politics around this. I don't play politics. I've told you that before. I'm the head of a department that enforces the law. We have to be politically neutral if we are going to enforce the law the way that it's supposed to be enforced, impartially. We want to make sure that when we show up, we're keeping every single person in this city safe, and we want to keep the peace. That's our jobs. And that's what our men and women out there every single day are doing, putting their lives on the line to keep this city safe. So I just want to be clear about a few things. The events that occurred on Saturday when there was a shooting involving ICE agents. So I'm going to start with a timeline. This started out with our two deputy chiefs who responded to the scene. That would be Deputy Chief Brian Kinane and Deputy Chief Gabriella Shemash. They did an excellent job over there. The narrative is out there that CPD was not on scene. CPD did not show up. Let me just put all of that to rest. At 10:32 a.m., CPD receives a call of a person shot at 39th and Kedzie. By 10:36 a.m., CPD responds. They located a woman who flagged them down. She had been shot. She stated that she had been shot by federal agents. CFD was called. She was taken to the hospital to have her gunshot wounds treated. At 11:06, CPD officers are at the hospital with this individual who had been shot. At 11:25 a.m., CPD units are holding down the scene where the offending vehicle was located. And when I say the offending vehicle, we're talking about the vehicle that smashed into the Border Patrol vehicle. At 11:36 a.m., the scene is then turned over to federal authorities for their investigation after CPD was clear that there was a shooting that involved this particular person who was at the hospital. At 12:12 p.m., in a separate incident, and I believe people have been conflating these two things. In a separate incident from the shooting, there was a vehicle that rammed federal agents off the road, rammed them off the road at 3200 West 35th Street. They crashed as a result of it. That offending vehicle also struck another vehicle in that location, another federal vehicle in that location, and then fled the scene. Our officers arrived on the scene to do the reports and document everything that happened. We have no documented injuries from that incident. At 12:28 p.m., federal agents called for CPD to assist due to a large crowd gathering at 39th and Kedzie. At 1:09 p.m., additional CPD units are en route to 39th and Kedzie. At 1:15 at 39th and Kedzie, where CPD is on scene, a group of protesters began moving barricades and federal agents deployed tear gas. At 2:56 p.m., objects are being thrown at CPD by members of the public. Federal agents again deployed gas to leave the area. So let me just kind of break down what happened there, because at 3:48, everything was all clear. When our officers arrived on scene, they met with the federal agents who were out there. The federal agents had deployed chemical agents. They deployed chemical agents while our officers were there. Those who will tell you that our officers weren't there, say that to the 27 officers who were affected by the chemical agents that were deployed by federal agents. There were 27 reports done to document our officers who were affected by that gas. I've since had a conversation with federal agents, and on that particular day, I spoke with the leadership of the federal agency. We talked about things as to how we were going to work this out. You see, communication is the key here. Communication does not mean collaboration. This had nothing to do with immigration enforcement. What it had to do with a scene where someone in our city was shot, and we, as CPD, are responsible for showing up, documenting that, even when the shooting and the investigation has been taken over by the FBI. We stayed out there for the crime scene to make sure that evidence was preserved, because if that evidence isn't preserved, a proper and a well-performed investigation cannot be done if we don't preserve the crime scene. If we allow people to breach that area and contaminate the crime scene, it hurts the investigation. We have a duty to do so. So I need to be clear about a few things. When a crime is being committed, CPD is going to show up. And it doesn't matter if there are ICE agents there. We have a duty to investigate and protect our city. Now, there are a lot of talking heads out there. There are a lot of politics being used here. And people are using this for their political talking points. Well, my officers are not political pawns. My leadership team, not political pawns. Their lives are too important to play politics with these men and women who face danger every single day. This is not a game. This is not a joke. This is still our city. And we still have a responsibility to maintain safety and calm in our city. Now, there are a couple of things that I want to address. One, what we have to deal with as a department. Because I want to be clear to those who have never done the job, who haven't done the job in years, who weren't on scene, who don't know the facts or have the facts. But they've got a lot of solutions, or a lot of ideas of what happened or what should have happened. Let me first talk about the Trust Act. The Trust Act prohibits law enforcement in the state of Illinois from engaging in assisting federal agents when it comes to immigration enforcement. We abide by that law. A city ordinance, the Welcoming City Ordinance, goes a little further. It even prohibits us from asking someone their status. We abide by that ordinance because in law enforcement, we don't make the laws, we uphold them. And we're sworn to do so. And we take our oaths seriously. Engaging with federal agents, we do it on a regular basis. We have task force officers who are out there every single day working to stop human trafficking, drug enforcement, gun violence, gun recoveries, search warrants, and everything in between when it comes to violent crime in our city. We have a great partnership with our federal agents, and we still do, and we will continue to work with them around violent crime. But let me explain how important it is to understand how difficult it is for our officers at times. Because when we look at the Trust Act and the Welcoming City Ordinance, sometimes there's a struggle when you're walking that line to make sure that you're not violating either one of those things, and at the same time enforcing the law the way that we're supposed to. One thing about law enforcement, I'll tell you this right now, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. And we accept that. So I'm not going to stand here and make excuses or pretend like the job is not a struggle, so we're going to make excuses about it. No, we're not going to do that. Again, these men and women go out there every single day, and these are the things that they fight through. And my leadership team wants to make sure that our officers don't get caught up in something where they end up in an investigation, fairly or unfairly, and they want to make sure that these officers are safe and that they can keep everyone else safe. So although we do not engage in immigration enforcement, we are going to enforce the law when the laws are violated. So let me be clear to the public about certain things. You have to excuse me, I'm a little dehydrated. Let me make this clear. Federal agents, ICE, HSI, are officers. They are agents of law enforcement. If you box them in with vehicles, it is reasonable for them to believe that they are being ambushed and that this could end in a deadly situation. And it's reasonable for them to use force based on those conditions. Do not box in any law enforcement officer. You are breaking the law when you do that. And you are putting yourself in danger. Following law enforcement agents around. The question is why? What do you plan on doing? It's also reasonable for them to believe that you're eventually going to do harm to them. If you ram any vehicle, especially that one that contains law enforcement agents, and that's any law enforcement, local, state, federal, county, and you do this intentionally, this is considered deadly force. Deadly force is anything that can cause great bodily harm or death. When you plow into a vehicle that contains law enforcement agents, you're using deadly force. And they can use deadly force in response to stop you. We need to be clear about these laws. We cannot become a society where we just decide to take everything in our own hands and start to commit crimes against law enforcement. It is a crime. You may not like what they're doing. I can understand that there's a lot of emotions out there, but that does not mean that you get to commit a crime, especially one that could lead to deadly force. We need to keep everyone safe. Our responsibilities when it comes to federal agents, and I've been asked these questions, we do not interfere with the duties and responsibilities of federal agents. We don't have to agree with it. It doesn't matter. You don't have to agree with it. We do not interfere with their orders. And when they go out to carry out their orders, they will do that the way that they're trained to do it and their understanding of what it is they have to do. Another one. CPD will not arrest and cannot arrest federal agents because someone deems what they're doing is illegal or unlawful. Their rules of engagement are different from CPD and other local law enforcement agents. We need to be clear about this. If we're not clear about this, we will see another event like we saw Saturday. We cannot move like this in this city. If we want to keep the peace in this city, we need to be smart about how we do things. And attacking law enforcement under any circumstances is not safe for anyone. Because as I've said before, a member of law enforcement who cannot protect himself or herself cannot protect anyone else. And we have a responsibility to make sure that we protect ourselves and each other so that we can protect everyone else in this city. If for any reason a crime is being committed, an ICE agent, state, local, police officers, if it involves law enforcement, we are going to show up. And whatever's going on there, we're going to work to stop it, put an end to it, calm the situation down. And if we need to stay there to continue to keep the situation calm, we will do exactly that. So I want to be clear about one of the things that we're going to do now. What we're going to do, and this is my decision because I need to be firm on this. When we show up to a scene and a crowd gathers, CPD is going to step out there. We're going to make sure that we maintain that scene and we keep people calm. This is our city, and we're going to make sure that we bring some type of calm or resolution to whatever's going on at that scene. We will be there. Now, when we look at what has happened, there are some things that we can work on. Because whenever you see something for the first time and you respond to it, there's always something that you can do better. That's what we do. And that's why we're having an after action about what happened so that we can prepare if something like this happens again, or to prepare to make sure that we can avoid it. So we learned some things. Now, I'm going to allow some questions from everyone here. I'll do my best to answer your questions to the best of my ability. Again, I would like for everyone to stay on topic as to what we're talking about here right now. And when it's over, there's some things that I'm probably going to touch on if we don't get to them with the questions. So go ahead.
Okay, we'll start here. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you. Madison with Black Club Chicago.
Okay, this is Anita Blanton here in Studio 32. You have been listening and to Superintendent Snelling there. Clear up some misinformation about incidents that took place over the weekend. He said he's going to limit his responses to specific incidents because he wants to stay out of politics. But there was a lot of misinformation he wanted to clear up about two separate incidents over the weekend that he believes people are conflating. Let's listen into a bit more of the questions, and then we'll talk on the opposite end of that.
So in order to help out at this location, we pulled officers from other places. They did not have the equipment to fight off a chemical agent, and they were affected by it. Were there any major injuries? No. Our officers are resilient and tough, and they were actually pretty tough on the scene, and but we made sure that it was documented just in case they had some after effects from it. We just want to make sure that our officers are safe. So those officers are doing good, and thank you for the question, for asking.
Sarah Schulte with ABC 7. Good afternoon, Superintendent. At any time, maybe you can clear this up too, at any time on Saturday were CPD officers told by dispatchers to stand down?
Well, I don't know about them being told by dispatchers. There was some communication between boots on the ground, a supervisor, and the chief of patrol. So there was some communication by phone. There was something that was put out there that there was an internal message that came from the chief of patrol. That is absolutely not true. There is no internal message. There was a phone conversation. I'm not sure until we get to our after action, all of the exact language that was there, but I have had a conversation with the chief of patrol who was concerned about officers showing up on a scene. The chief of patrol at that time had no information that anyone was in danger. And let me just be clear about one other thing when it comes to these federal agents. These federal agents can handle themselves, all right? We've been out there and we've seen it. Now, that doesn't mean that we're going to leave them because we know that they can handle themselves. We need to make sure that we have our officers and enough of them to respond to a scene if they are being surrounded. So were they told to stand down? Our officers were not told to stand down. Our officers were out there throughout the entire event. I would never tell our officers to stand down, because if our officers were in trouble and we needed help from other officers, I would expect those officers to step in and help us. And it's the same thing that we do on our side. When someone is in trouble, we're going to step in. So to get a little more information about that, we'll know by tomorrow what that exact conversation was.
Superintendent, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, thank you. JC Navarrete, NBC Chicago. Going off the point here, damned if you do, damned if you don't, as you mentioned, how do you toe that line between showing up and providing backup for a fellow officer who may be in need, but not helping them and execute their orders that are, of course, from a federal level? How do you toe that line between both of those?
You know, doing the right thing, showing up on the scene, doing the right thing, preparing for the backlash, the rumors, the things that people write and say, the things that people accuse you of. Officers deal with this on a regular basis. And this is why wellness for officers is so important, because this is the type of thing that an officer has to go home and kind of decompress from, right? You show up to a job, you know you're there to make sure that people are safe. And if there are immigration officers there, they're now being accused of enforcing immigration. They now become the subject of an investigation. They don't know how that investigation is going to unfold. But on my end, it's my responsibility to explain these situations. It's my responsibility to take that off of the backs of my officers, that when they go there and do the right thing, that they can be certain that their superintendent is going to stand up for them for doing what they're supposed to do and doing the job the right way, and that's exactly what I'm going to do.
Hi, Superintendent Saramaki, CBS.
Hi, sir.
This is, I guess, part clarification, part question. I think you mentioned you met the day before on how we're going to work this out. Was that a meeting on Friday with federal partners?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure if you understood what I was saying.
Yeah, I don't think I did. So I just wanted to clarify. Have you met, I think you mentioned you met the day before to talk about how we were going to work this out.
No. So I actually have contact with federal agents. And the reason that I talk to them is because when we have a situation that's volatile, that could blow up, that could turn into a full-blown riot, we have to have this communication. Because if we're going to keep the peace and we're going to keep this city as safe as we can possibly keep it, we need to have that communication. The rules of engagement for federal agents and the rules of engagement for CPD are completely different. There are things that these agents do that we don't do here in the city. So we need to make sure that we have an understanding of how we're going to go about keeping the peace at a scene when a crime has been committed, how we're going to stop violence if that's going to happen. And I had what was a very fruitful conversation that stopped Saturday from ending in a riot-like situation. And we're going to continue to do that.
Can you elaborate on what those strategies were then that prevented maybe things?
Well, I won't go into too much with that, but what I will say is this. Having a conversation about our officers going in, taking over the front line, making sure that we're standing out in front of these protesters so that they can then move to the inner perimeter and do what they needed to do to maintain that crime scene, get that crime scene taken care of as soon as possible, get them out of there as soon as possible. That brings down the boiling point. So if we're working to make sure that we're keeping the peace, this has nothing to do with immigration. It has to do with keeping the peace in our city and keeping calm.
Hi, Superintendent Sophie with the Sun-Times.
Hi,
I don't
Sophie.
know if you could talk a little bit more about, we're going to be involved in scenes like this now. Will it look different from how it looked Saturday? Did this federal leadership you spoke with have anything to say about those 27 agents who were, affected by chemical gas?
Oh, absolutely. He was extremely concerned about it. We are going to have further conversations about it. He was also appreciative of the fact that we came in, stepped in, and he was the first to say that this could have turned into a full-blown riot, and it didn't. So CPD, again, just can never say enough about how proud I am of those officers going in, being converged on like that, stepping in, and making sure that they kept the peace there.
Brandon with WBBM News Radio. I think during the DNC, you kind of showed and ushered in what looked like a new era of crowd control and how that might look like successful crowd control. Are you going to be utilizing any of those techniques that were learned and trained for during the DNC? And the second part of this is when you're doing crowd control around these federal agents. Will federal agents then be allowed to join in, and would the techniques like we see in Broadview that are being used, or other gas being dispersed throughout the city, are those going to be included into your crowd control techniques?
No, because that and let me just go back to your first question, and it's a great one, and thank you for that. Our officers are trained, and we continue that training just in case we have other civil unrest or protests that are going on, First Amendment activity, and our officers are very well trained, as you said. They'll show up on the scene and they'll utilize that training. Depending on the size of the crowd, things of that nature, tactics and techniques could change based on that. However, when they show up, all of the techniques, tactics that they've learned, that's what we'll be utilizing in these situations to diffuse situations and to keep things calm. when it comes to deployments of chemical agents and things of that nature, again, the federal law enforcement, they have a different probably training around it. They have different rules of engagement. So when they deploy based on their tactics and what their rules are. When we take control of a scene, we will have direct contact, communication with them so that they understand that we're going to cover that front line so that it will be unnecessary to use these chemical agents at this time, because we'll be in front, we'll make sure that we keep these things covered.
Omar Jimenez, CNN. Good to see you.
Hey, how's it going?
So in the timeline that you put out, you said 1228 federal agents call for help for a crowd, 109 additional CPD units are en route. I know there were already officers on scene, but can you just give some clarity on what were the considerations, or what would the considerations have been between in the 31 minutes or so, or 41 minutes, quick math, or so, when additional units were still being considered to be sent to the scene? What was the decision making around there, and why was that needed?
Well, the decision making was based on a request. There was a crime scene there that had to be processed by the FBI, who was doing the investigation, and you still had a crowd there, not a very large crowd, but within that crowd there were some unruly people. There were federal agents there. And they held their line, but we wanted to make sure that we got there because there had been some chemical agents that were deployed. We wanted to get there to make sure that we brought the temperature down, allowed for the processing of the crime scene. Once it was processed, then everybody could leave. But that gap of time that you're talking about, it took a little time to move officers from one location to another to get those officers over there. So we pulled officers from other deployments to get over there to help out with what was going on at that location.
Hi, Superintendent Snelling. Tonya Hill with the Tribe.
Tony, how are you?
Tonya, but thank you.
Tonya, okay. I didn't get that right.
No problem. I wanted to ask, in your comments earlier, you said CPD cannot and will not arrest federal agents, but today the mayor signed an executive order establishing ICE-free zones. So my question for you is, how will the police department, be responsible for enforcing this executive order?
Well, here's what I'll tell you. I've only gotten a chance today to browse over that executive order because it was recently released. That's something that I'm going to have to look at DOL, the Department of Law, sit down and talk about what's in that executive order. So I don't really want to speak on anything that I haven't studied and have a true understanding of. But again, I will go back and say what I said before. We do not arrest federal agents who are here to do their jobs.
Emmy Victor with WGN. Good to see you.
How are you? Good to see you again.
You too. Actually, on that note about the inability of arresting federal agents, I know you all are still responsible for documentation. So I guess my question is, how closely are these situations being documented in terms of the actions of protesters as well as the actions from federal agents? Because as we know, there have already been lawsuits popping up in Broadview, for example, because of the situations, people being pushed to the ground, potential excessive force that people are claiming they've received in that area. So, if there are court cases that stem from this, how closely are you documenting both sides of the situation?
Well, here's what we don't document things on that level. If we make an arrest, if we put hands on someone, if we use force as an agency ourselves, we follow our policies. And this goes back to me saying that the rules of engagement for federal agents going to be different from that of local law enforcement, especially at CPD. A lot of what we do and the way that we respond, our policies are more restrictive than federal and state law. So when you are looking at what a federal agent is doing, you might be judging that federal agent based on our policies. And you can't do that. Those things have to be separated. So when a federal agent takes someone into custody, the way that they use force, that's going to be for the federal agency to explain, not CPD. So what we worry about and what I worry about are my officers policing constitutionally and keeping each other safe, keeping the city safe, and keeping everyone safe around them, and stopping those who will commit violent acts against anyone. That's what I'm concerned about. So we don't document what they do. That's up to them.
Good afternoon, Superintendent. Caroline with the Chicago Tribune. Nice to meet you. Yes.
Good to meet you, Caroline.
So the feds called for help at 12:28 p.m. There's a computer message timestamped at 12:28 p.m. that says no units will respond. The dispatchers later captured on audio saying that she's waving off units from 39th and Kedzie. I am wondering what would you call that, if not a stand down, and if there were already enough units on scene, how many were there circa 12:28, 12:30 p.m.?
That's something else that we have to look at, and we have to see because sometimes what you hear on the radio does not necessarily reflect what's happening on the ground once someone's there, but we did have officers over there. We have a timeline and a breakdown of who responded. And if you listen to the radio transmission, there were multiple officers who said they were going to that location. And they showed up because that's what CPD does when they hear that someone's in danger. Now, one of the things that I will say when it comes to that location was separate from the shooting. That was where vehicles were rammed. I believe it was along 31st Street. I believe 3100 West 35th Street. We're still looking into that. This is something that was said over the air, and when I say we're still looking into it, this is part of our after action. I want to be clear about one thing, though, and this will also be a part of the after action. When there is an immediate need for CPD to respond, I don't want anyone, especially when someone's life may be in danger, I don't want anyone to have to call anybody in leadership. I want them to respond. And I want them to respond immediately, because it doesn't matter what an order is. If you know as a law enforcement agent that another law enforcement agent is in trouble, or anyone else, and you need to stop violence against that person, I want them responding, and I want them to respond. Now, you can always explain why you may have disobeyed an order, if that was an order. But I can tell you right now, there is no internal memo that says that. Now, there may have been an understanding of that, but we want to make sure that our officers are responding on the scene. And this is something that we're going to be talking to our officers about. This is something we're going to be talking to our leadership so that that message trickles down. If there are exigent circumstances, work now and then talk about your response later, because you will respond based on the totality of circumstances that you see at the scene right then and there. And if there are split-second decisions that need to be made, we can always explain those actions for those officers.
Final question. Afternoon, Superintendent. My name is Peter Nikias. I'm a reporter with Illinois Answers.
How are you, Peter?
I'm good. Thank you for asking. I'm curious if at any point during the afternoon you or anyone in your command staff had a conversation with whoever was in command for the different federal agencies and just said, hey, you don't need to use gas because we know how to do crowd control. A lot of the 9th District, 8th District regulars were there. We saw residents calling them out because they knew them from previous interactions. Did you or anyone in your command staff at any point say, like, hey, it doesn't need to go down like this?
Well, this is why I said that I am right now having conversations with federal leadership when it comes to ICE or immigration, so that we can work that part of it out. And this is why I'm saying now that at CPD we're going to show up. Yeah. If we're there and we're in control of the crowd and we're handling that, there's no need for the federal agents to be confronted by these protesters or have the protesters confront them. Yeah. So,
point of clarification that Reggie brought that up. So I understand absolutely when somebody calls for help, go. That's like the first thing I tell you in police academy, right? Like you call for help, please show up. So one of the things that we heard from residents on Saturday was that they were pleading with the police for help because the use of gas felt disproportionate to what was being offered from protesters. And I understand that there's limited ability to intervene. But I'm just curious, like, why not have that conversation that day? It's like, hey,
so here's the deal. As I told you before, our officers were deployed all over the city. So to get enough people there so that everyone felt safe, it took time to do that. Now, again, we can have that conversation on the scene, but if that's not how they're trained, that's probably not going to take much effect. That's why communication afterwards has to happen. And I've already reached out to the leadership and expressed concern about that and what we're going to do moving forward, and that's why the communication has to happen. The difficulty here has always been around the belief that CPD is working with immigration enforcement, which we're not. And there's always been that difficulty. But right now, I'm standing here to tell you this. I don't really care about what people think about that anymore because I know what we're doing. And I'll just explain that so that we can avoid these types of situations happening in the future. Now, I get what you're saying. That's always, when we're looking at a situation like that, we're looking at it in hindsight. Right? And things were kind of all over the place. We now know this was the first time something like this happened involving immigration, where someone rammed a federal agent and a shooting occurred as a result of it. Box federal agents in, and a shooting occurred. This was the first time this happened. This is why we're doing an after action, so that we can better respond to this the next time something like this happens. So I get you. So hold on. No, hold on. Listen, I just need to address another thing. And this is very important. There's a lot of heat out there around the Chief of Patrol. And I'm going to make this clear. The Chief of Patrol would never tell someone to stand down when any fellow law enforcement agent is in trouble or in need of help. Now, I will say there was a lot of miscommunication, talking points back and forth about what was really happening out there on the ground, and we need to do better. And if we screw something up, we mess up, we fess up. We fix it. But what I will tell you is this. I'm going to tell you about a man with 30 years on this job who has been out there and handled over 400 protests as the Chief of Patrol. A man who stands on the front line with all of his officers. And I know this for a fact because I stand out there with them. The weekend of Mexican independence, he was out there every single day, worked 18 hours every day, out there with his troops. The DNC, the No Kings March, every protest involving the Palestinians, protests over Gaza, protests over immigration. The man is out there. He has worked on the south side, the west side, downtown. The man loves this job, and he loves his officers. And I'm telling you this from the perspective of someone who sits and talks with this man every day. He rarely goes home. He wants to make sure that each and every one of these officers goes home safely. He has the respect of the protests and the protesters and the people who lead these protest groups. He has a relationship with them. He knows how to talk to people. He knows how to deal with people. And the fact that someone could post one thing without any background, with any context, without any information, put lies out there about this man and what he has given to this city, what he has given to this department, I'm just going to stand here and tell you right now, if I were to turn my back on this man because of political BS, and yes, political BS, and people's political beliefs, I would be a coward. That's not going to happen. That's my partner in crime. I will go to war with this man. I'm not going to allow anybody to rake this man over the coals. The DNC could not have been a success without him. Couldn't have been without him. So, you can't be pro-police when you need something, and then anti when it's politically advantageous. You either believe that the job of policing is a tough job, or you don't. You either believe in law and order, or you don't. We're going to judge a person based on a post. This man has served this city with honor. And I'm going to stand with him till the end. This man's brother was a federal agent who is now deceased. He talks about it. He talks about where he came from. Small town, poor man. We have similar stories. Never thought he'd be the chief of patrol, and thankful for it every single day. When I talked to him, he was concerned that our officers who would go there would be exposed to chemical agents without their masks. He wanted to make sure that these officers were well prepared if they got there. He wanted to protect his officers. But when we got the information, which I got directly from the head of Border Patrol, that the agents had been involved in the shooting, they had been boxed in, we talked. He immediately redeployed resources to the location to get more people there. See, when you don't know the whole story, it's easy to go online and listen to those who are trolling. I don't really care about that because I know the facts. So I've always said this, and I tell this to my officers. There are two things that you can look at. You can look at your reputation, and you can look at your character. People can determine your reputation. All they have to do is go to social media and tell a lie. Put something up there, post it. But what they can never take away is your character. Because I know the man's character, he knows his character. His family knows his character. Reputation, I never worry about someone's reputation until I have a conversation with them and I get to know their character. People will say your reputation precedes you. It does until you get to know a man or a woman's character. And I'm telling you right now, in law enforcement, with everything that all of us in law enforcement have been through over the years, we cannot turn our backs on each other because of what was posted online. When we do things like that, we're failing each other. How can we talk about anyone else who doesn't support us as police officers if we're not supporting each other? We have to do better. And I'm telling you, Chief Hine is a man of character. And I'm standing here saying this to you, and I don't really care what anybody has to say about it, and I'm going to stand with him. He is my chief of patrol. We will protect this city. We are going to protect all of our law enforcement agents when we're out there. But most of all, we serve the residents of this city. And we are going to protect you. That's what we're here for. That's what he's concerned about, which is why I chose him as chief of patrol. He cares about this city, and he cares about the residents of this city. He cares about law enforcement. And we're going to make sure that we protect everybody in this city and keep calm in this city. This is our city. And the Chicago Police Department is one hell of a department with some amazing people out there working, putting their lives on the line to keep this city safe. And we're going to continue to do so. We're going to show up when absolutely necessary. So I thank you for coming, but look for us out there to do exactly what I said we're going to do, because we've got the best people to get that job done. Thank you.
Okay, we have been listening in there to Superintendent Larry Snelling of Chicago Police. In the end there, getting very passionate, defending his chief of patrol, that is John Hine, who he actually promoted to that position in March of last year. The patrol chief, John Hine, has been with the department for nearly 30 years. But of course, there is this great controversy now, largely online, with posts about the patrol chief, John Hine, regarding whether there was or was not a stand down order on Saturday. The superintendent making it very clear there were two separate incidents that took place on Saturday on the southwest side of the city, one at 35th, another one at 39th, that people he believes are conflating into one incident. That one at 39th in particular has garnered a great deal of controversy, because this is where a woman was shot after officers were rammed and boxed in by about 10 cars on Chicago's southwest side there in that area. Two suspects have now been charged in connection with that particular incident. But after it took place there, even the Assistant Secretary of Homeland Security, Tricia McLaughlin, posted on X on Saturday saying, accusing Chicago police officers of leaving the shooting scene. And she said that the department refused to assist in securing the area. So that is coming from the Assistant Secretary of Homeland Security. Now, Superintendent Snelling saying there that his officers met with federal agents when they got there. So he's saying they were there. In fact, he says to those who say CPD wasn't there, he says tell that to the 27 officers affected by chemical agents that were dispersed in that area, because after the shooting, there was a large scene in terms of people coming out to protest what had taken place there. So he says there was some communication, and he says don't call that or that the communication doesn't mean that there was collaboration between CPD and the federal agents, but there was some type of communication there. He said that he's even spoken with the head of Border Patrol since that incident took place. He says his officers and leadership are not political pawns, and that they have a duty to maintain safety and calm in our city. So he said that they were at both scenes. Now, he also went on to mention two things that I think we'll talk a lot about in the coming weeks, and especially today. One is the Trust Act, and that prohibits law enforcement from assisting federal agents when it comes to immigration enforcement. And the other is the Welcoming City Ordinance, okay? He says that they do walk a fine line not to violate those two things, but he says they don't make the laws, they're sworn to enforce them. Giving notice also to residents as well about behaviors that can warrant reasonable force, even deadly force, going back to that shooting scene, again, where officers were rammed and boxed in by about 10 cars in that area. He says his decision moving forward Well, that CPD will be more present at scenes. He says he's working on an after-action report right now to see what they can do better. But he was very strong when saying that officers were not told to stand down. He admitted there was some type of communication that has caused this controversy, saying that the chief of patrol, though, would never tell officers to stand down, especially when other agents are in need of assistance. He said to people who are posting online, specifically about this chief of patrol, John Hine, you cannot be pro-police when you need something and then anti-police when it's politically advantageous. Also, there was a question that was asked by one of the reporters about now trying to police the anti-ICE free zones, okay? He's talked about the need to study over the new ICE-free zones and the executive order that was just signed this morning by the mayor. Obviously, that brings about a whole new type of issue there for, again, going back into the Trust Act and the Welcoming City Ordinance that they will have to look over and speak with attorneys about. So much more to come through that. He says that he expects to look over that ordinance today, and hopefully they'll have more information, too, about that miscommunication from over the weekend by tomorrow. So we will continue to ask more questions about that. And of course, we are still awaiting the press conference, the next press conference today that should be about 2 p.m. when it is 2:02 right now. So maybe any minute now with Governor Pritzker, that's expected to talk about President Trump's announcement that he is authorizing the National Guard, troops coming from Texas, maybe as many as 300 to 400 of them to be mobilized here in the state of Illinois. So it is a big day. There are a lot of major issues that we are expecting. And again, another press conference that we should hear from any moment. But I do want to go ahead and move on to our next topic and see how much of this conversation we can have. Obviously, throughout the year, one other major issue has been the tariffs, right? Are they going to happen? Are they not? What do businesses do? How can they go about, not passing along that money to their customers? And one local business had a lawsuit that's now gone all the way up to the Supreme Court. And so I want to bring in Elena Ruffman, the Vice President of Marketing and Product Development at Hand to Mind in Vernon Hills. Thank you so much for taking some time to talk with us today. And I apologize in advance if we need to break our conversation to get to the next press conference.
No worries. I get it.
Okay, tell us a little bit about your business for those who haven't seen the earlier reports that we had about.
912, welcome back. We're going right to Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson speaking about an executive order amid the ICE actions in Chicago.
Building code violations. The residents were dealing with deplorable conditions already, and this was before ICE trampled on them. But when they came in the middle of the night, they terrorized the families that were living there. There were children who were without clothing. They were zip-tied, taken outside at 3 o'clock in the morning. A senior resident, an American citizen with no warrants, was taken outside and handcuffed for 3 hours. Doors were blown off their hinges, walls were broken through. Immigration agents coming from Black Hawk helicopters to set up snipers on nearby buildings. This is America. One resident described the situation plainly, and I quote, "They had immigrants in one van and black people in another van." This raid wasn't about public safety. It was about and it's certainly not about immigration. This was about a show of authoritarianism, a forceful display of tyranny. They sent a clear message to all Chicagoans. They said, "We do not respect your rights. We can do anything we want, and we will film it and put it on social media." The very next day, ICE agents chased people outside of a homeless shelter on the south side and then caused a car accident on the west side. Immigration agents put a young black man in a chokehold on the side of the street in East Garfield Park. Witnesses, one of which you will hear from this morning, bravely filmed the interaction, eventually leading to this person's release. On Friday, agents dispersed tear gas in the middle of a busy city street. Chicagoans were hit with chemical agents while walking their children home from school. A couple ran from tear gas with a 2-year-old child in their care. Agents went into the Humboldt Park Health Center and detained a sitting elected official, Alder Jessie Fuentes of the 26th Ward, because she simply requested to see a warrant. On Saturday, they escalated even further by shooting a U.S. citizen. They claimed it was defensive fire, but frankly, we cannot trust anything that comes out of the administration. It was only a few short weeks ago that they claimed officers were severely injured in the killing of Mr. Villegas Gonzalez in Franklin Park. A Sun-Times investigation found that the agent said on a body camera footage that it was, in fact, nothing major. We have a rogue, reckless group of heavily armed mass individuals roaming throughout our city that are not accountable to the people of Chicago. Their actions put all Chicagoans at risk. When protesters confronted federal immigration agents in Brighton Park on Saturday, they were met with pepper balls and more repression. CPD responded to attempt to de-escalate the situation, and ICE tear gassed our police officers. Let me be clear. Tear gassing the women and men who serve as Chicago Police Department officers is not how we make our city safer. I'm calling for a full investigation into this incident and into all of the brutality that we have seen over the past week. They are taking police resources that should be in our neighborhoods, serving Chicagoans and diverting them to deal with the chaos that they are causing. We need ICE out of our city so that we can continue to focus on the strategies that have been working to drive violent crime down. These actions tell us simple truth. If we allow this administration to take away due process for anyone, we will allow them to take away due process for everyone. They told us that this was about the worst of the worst. In reality, they are going after anyone who objects to families being ripped apart and community members being disappeared. ICE lies and people die. We cannot allow this to continue. We must take action more drastic than what we have taken before, because what we are seeing is a more radical attempt to undermine our democracy. And today we are signing an executive order aimed at reining in this out-of-control administration. The order establishes ICE-free zones. That means that city property and unwilling private businesses will no longer serve as staging grounds for these raids. Our school parking lots are not for ICE to load their weapons. They are for Chicagoans who drop their kids off to learn. Our libraries are not for ICE to prepare for a raid. They're for Chicagoans to read and relax. Our parks are not for ICE to set up checkpoints. They are for Chicagoans to play and enjoy. Private establishments can partner with us to make it clear that private property is private property, and ICE cannot enter establishments without a valid warrant. Private entities may voluntarily choose to display signage to designate their property as part of a citywide network of community spaces that stand together in affirming the safety, dignity, and belonging of all of our residents. By extending this protection beyond city-owned land, the order builds a broad civic shield that limits the reach of harmful enforcement practices. It strengthens neighborhood solidarity, and it reaffirms Chicago's role as a welcoming city. The fact is, we cannot allow them to rampage throughout our city with no checks or balances. Nobody is above the law. If we break the law, you should be held accountable. If Congress will not check this administration, then Chicago will. I know there are many Chicagoans who are disturbed by the images and the videos that they are seeing on the news and social media. There are many who are scared and shocked by what they are seeing. The truth is that we are at a tipping point. This administration is trying to divide us and pit people, groups against one another. They want to divide and conquer. And as I said, in the South Shore, and this has been said very clearly, black people in one van and immigrants in another. In the face of this unprecedented threat, this moment calls for unity. Black, brown, white, Asian, young, old, north side, west side, south side, we must all put aside our differences and defend one another, because if we allow this to continue to be unchecked, by the time we realize what's happening, it'll be too late. And this executive order is a step towards accountability and is calling for the basic rule of law. In the coming days and weeks, we may be pushed, if not forced, to take even more dramatic action if this administration continues to escalate and provoke our people. In closing, last night I spoke with the governor, and he informed me that the Trump administration is deploying Texas National Guard to our city. We will speak to our response later today. We'll do that with the governor as well as the attorney general. For now, let me just say that we are unequivocally going to continue to reject the military occupation of our city. The Trump administration must end the war on Chicago. The Trump administration must end this war against Americans. The Trump administration must end its attempt to dismantle our democracy. Right as we are making historic progress in reducing violence, the Trump administration is seeking to destabilize our city and provoke chaos. We said that they would use ICE as a pretext to send in the National Guard, and now they are doing just that. I've also said for the last couple of years that the extreme right in this country refused to accept the results of the Civil War. They have repeatedly called for a rematch. But in the coming weeks, we will use this opportunity to build greater resistance. Chicagoans are clear. Militarizing our troops in our city as justification to further escalate a war in Chicago will not be tolerated. The past teaches us that just because we are on the right side of history, that doesn't mean that we will succeed. It's going to take courage and determination, bravery, unity. But one thing that I know for sure in this great nation, this moment that we are in, Chicago was built for this moment. Immigrants from around the world, descendants of slaves, have come to this city to make it the global capital of the world. And now we stand at a moment that is testing our very humanity, and the city of Chicago will stand the test of time. Thank you very much. And now, please welcome to the podium, Pastor Chris Harris.
Say good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Pastor Chris Harris, and I want to begin by saying thank you to our mayor, Brandon Johnson, and to the many city leaders and constituents who are present here today. I serve as the senior pastor of two churches on the south side of Chicago, Bright Star Church Chicago and St. James Church Chicago. I'm also the founder and CEO of two social services agencies, Bright Star Community Outreach and Bright Star Community Development Corporation, where we manage a homeless shelter that supports more than 260 residents, housing both men and women. I'm joined here today together with our executive directors of both organizations, Lucretia Kindred and Carl West. Together, our agencies employ more than 140 Chicagoans. And every day, we work to uplift, to serve, and protect the most vulnerable among us. For those who need emotional support, please call our Bright Star Trauma Helpline at 833-TURN-123. If there was ever a time that we needed support, now is that time. Just a few days ago at our Bright Star homeless shelter in Bronzeville, the Black metropolis, ICE agents raided our facility. Without warning, they came in. They handcuffed, detained, and took 4 residents. Let me be clear. They were not criminals. They were human beings trying to survive, trying to heal, and trying to find home, shelter. Our shelter is not harboring criminals. We're housing the unhoused. We're offering dignity to those who society has discarded. And yet, while our city is showing compassion, there are those who are cheering this chaos. Some in power claim Chicago is too violent, and they say that is the reason that ICE and soldiers are being deployed here. But let me remind you of something crucial. Neither the governor of Illinois nor the mayor of Chicago ever requested migrants to be sent here. If you want to hold people accountable, don't just hold those accountable who are powerless. Hold those accountable who are powerful. Arrest those political officials who heinously use government money to charter planes and buses to send migrants and immigrants to sanctuary cities like ours.
You are listening live to a news conference taking place right now. That was Pastor Chris Harris speaking out about ICE agents' conduct in the city. Prior to that, some strong words from Mayor Brandon Johnson. This news conference about an executive order that Johnson is signing that would prohibit the federal government from using public lots for staging, and also affirming the rights of private property owners to deny ICE access unless there is a warrant. He says he is wanting to establish an ICE-free zone.
And the zones he talked about would not just be on city property, but he also talked about, again, those private people, those businesses that could sign in on this. Also school parking lots, libraries, parks, anywhere where families are and do not want to have that type of action in their communities. We'll take